Hello and welcome to the full moon walkthrough for the full moon in Aries on October 17th. I'm your astrologer, Cawnawyn, and today we're going to be taking a look at the full moon chart, doing a bit of a tutorial as well as giving you a forecast of what to expect this full moon cycle. So if we take a look at the chart, just a quick reminder, I use a 0 degrees Aries rising, so that way we're not working with any house structures here. That keeps it easier and we can just focus on the aspects of the planets. Now, if you take this time of 4:26 Pacific time AM, apply it to wherever you are in the world, you will be able to see how the house structure changes based on your location, as well as where these planets align in your own natal chart, which I highly encourage you to do to see where this full moon is landing for you and what house placement is resonating for you. No matter what, the planets at this time of day will all be in the same position. It'll just look different within the chart itself. But for today, we're just going to focus on the major aspects and the major themes I am seeing coming up for this forecast. As we have our sun and our moon in an opposition, I know I go over this every time, but our sun opposing the moon is what creates a full moon in the sky, because we on Earth are between the sun and the moon, and the sun is illuminating the moon in the night sky. Therefore, it shows up as an opposition. An opposition energy is usually energy that's presented to us through relationship. So we will see other people perhaps playing out these aspects of the full moon. They may come to us in the form of us grappling with our relationships, or even within a tug of war in ourselves. This can look like a relationship to anybody. It doesn't have to be a romantic partnership. It can look like a sibling or a parent or a best friend, or your relationship to your job or a community group or some form of political party, right? And so this full moon showing up in some form of relationship because that oppositional energy is created. However, worth noting that, of course, within a magical practice, we know that as above, so below, as within, so without. So while these themes might be playing out in a very obvious three-dimensional, mundane way in your life, they are likely showing up within internal conflicts within yourself. So I invite you to reflect on that if that's something that feels resonant for you this season. If we take a look at what placements we have going on, if we think about our sun in Libra, which is the sun is trying to really pursue some sort of peace or harmony. So it's constantly checking in with the temperature of everybody else's moods and actions and desires, wants, and needs. And the sun in Libra is an expert at balancing, or at least attempting to balance, all of those things in order to find what is fair, what is just, what is right, what is beautiful. It is ruled by Venus, and so the sun wants to operate, our soul, our collective soul wants to operate in this place of taking all sides into account and having a fair, balanced system. That's why Libra is represented by the scales. But now the moon, which is representative of our collective heart, our collective innermost place, our relationship to mother and motherhood and nurturing, and how we nurture ourselves, how we protect ourselves. This is the most intimate, sensitive place within us. So now the collective moon is in Aries, and the moon in Aries is very passionate. It doesn't care if it upsets others, because it is going full force where it wants to go with no abandon and no insecurity. It just says, I want this, and it races after it and wants to be first to get there. The moon is, as you can see, in a very different place. Perhaps our sun, perhaps ourself, is trying to mask whatever emotions are coming up, but we just feel this intense passion. It could be angry passion, it could be artistic passion, it could be unhinged passion, if you will. And we, are being stimulated to act in such a way. And Aries is usually acting on behalf of itself, or a cause that it feels a great identification with, a great resonance with. Now we have the moon, as you can see, very close to Chiron here. Chiron's been in Aries for a long time. So anytime we have an Aries moon, it's going to talk to Chiron. But this full moon being in such close proximity to Chiron really pulls that energy into play. So what is Chiron? Chiron, in short, many astrologers call him the wounded healer, but truly I think of him as a teacher and a master of how to heal. We in our lives experience some form of a wound, perhaps in childhood, perhaps in adulthood, perhaps over and over again throughout the course of our lives. And whatever that wound is that persists within us that we cannot heal, but that we strive to or pursue healing of, by pursuing that, we are in turn teaching those around us, affecting those around us in a way that helps them heal. It's kind of all of our transformation transformative journey that ends up becoming a ripple effect through many, many different people. So that means that this moon is trying to pursue some sort of healing, although because Chiron is involved, this may in fact inflict a wound or perhaps trigger an old wound. So something to do with this moon may be exposing, right? The sun's light is illuminating onto our moon and our Chiron. So perhaps it's a wound inside of you that has really needed to heal, that needs some exposition, that you're trying to bring in this air energy of communication, of expressing yourself, expressing your needs. Perhaps that looks really, really hard because your soul has been trying to maintain a level of diplomacy with everybody. And by opening up, by exposing this potentially ugly thing that you find inside of you, you might be sowing discord. You might be causing some discomfort. I want to encourage you that because it's Aries energy we're dealing with this moon, it really is about being brave, being courageous enough to say the truth. Aries is incredibly blunt, but what's refreshing is the fact that they are truthful, that they will just say it and call it like they see it. So how can you incorporate some of that energy into expressing what you need, what you desire, what you hope for, perhaps even what you need to protect yourself, right? It doesn't have to be from this place of wanting to manifest or create or seek. It can be from this place of, I need to take a step back. I need to claim my space. I need to set up a boundary. Again, even if that causes some form of discord that the world around us, the collective sun soul, doesn't particularly like very much or find very appropriate, I'm going to say it doesn't matter. But also you may be standing in the sun's energy where people around you are suddenly coming at you with their needs, with their issues, with their desires, with their stimulation. And I encourage you to have some grace with people because they're learning to voice those things. It is coming from a place of needing to heal a wound or grappling with a wound. We can have that Libra Venetian grace about us when dealing with people that might be coming at us a little bit more aggressively or a little bit more pointedly. Now, if we take a look over here, something about this whole full moon, as well as this process that we're going through in healing this wound, right, is closely tied to our now retrograde Jupiter. Jupiter just went retrograde, and Jupiter is going to be talking to Chiron directly at this 21 degrees of fire and air signs pretty much for the whole rest of the month and beyond, because Jupiter is moving very slowly in the sky. And once again, we bring in this element of communication because Gemini is about the network, is about the discourse, the dialogue, and finding the black and white, the polarities, right? And perhaps these polarities are coming up very obviously, but it's through this conversation, this exposition of facts, of data, of all of the things that we might be feeling, thinking, saying, experiencing, that we are able to come to some sort of healing truth within ourselves and within our relationships. And so something about this full moon, I feel like, is really triggering this Jupiter and may really shape how our Jupiter retrograde reorientation with our belief systems, right, is going to be shaped from here on out. Because that is what Jupiter retrograde is all about, is taking our Jupiter, our beliefs, our morals, our values, our big ideas, our optimism, and saying, are we practicing what we're preaching? It's a renegotiation, a reconsideration, all the retrograde words, right? That's what we're doing for the next several months while Jupiter is in retrograde in Gemini, and remembering to incorporate that air energy of expressing those things is so, so important. And I think that this full moon might be the first step. Again, it might be a trigger. It might be something difficult because Aries is not afraid to hurt feelings. So just be prepared for that and have some grace around that with yourself and with others, and recognize that this grit and that friction is what is causing us to take into account this Jupiter in its retrograde cycle and what is starting that season off for us. A couple of other things I wanted to mention, because our sun is in Libra, it is ruled by Venus. And if we take a look at the sun's ruler, it is Venus here at the very end of Scorpio. I did mention this in a past Bonfire Babble episode where I do the monthly forecast every astrological season, but I did find it so interesting that our Libra season started with Venus in a form of crisis in 29 degrees, that final moment, final degree of Libra, its home ruled sign. And now we come to the moon having gone all the way around, and Venus is once again in this anaretic degree, this 29th final degree of a sign. And as it is leaving the light of Scorpio, there is this element of loss here. Now, it might be a shedding, it might be a detachment or a block or some form of like deliberate, I'm going to let this go. And it also might just be a consideration of what has been lost, what needs to be let go. If you're not ready to let go of something, maybe just investigating why that is, not necessarily worrying about taking the action right now. But Venus being representative of our self-worth and our values, as well as how we pursue relationship, the things that we wish to attract and that we do attract, right? Being in Scorpio, there is a focus around this. There's a strategy around this, and there might be a moment necessary to consider what it is that we strategically need to let go of, or perhaps that we had to let go of, having some grace around that with ourselves, letting go of the shame, letting go of the guilt of having to let go of something. And that might be a painful process. It is in a really gorgeous sextile with Pluto right now. I don't always love Venus and Pluto talking to each other, I'm not gonna lie, but I think what it does do is it really exposes that depth, right? Where Venus is able to stare bravely at whatever those plutonic dark secret things are inside of us, which often can bring up sabotage and guilt and shame. But Venus can look at that in a loving, tender way and say, I accept you anyway. So I encourage you to really think about how you can be accepting the letting go of, accepting the loss of, in a way that adds some grace to your life, that doesn't require you to hold on to the guilt and shame that perhaps that you have been. And so letting that go by the wayside, because Venus just hours after this full moon is going to go into Sagittarius. And then Venus's whole focus becomes very, very future oriented. And you may even feel that shift during the day, where suddenly you're thinking about much more distant future things, future goals and plans, future travel, future education, and you may find yourself really, really attracted to sort of far off daydreaming instead of living in the present, because she has just gone through this transformative process, sort of her rising from the ashes as she steps into the energy of Sagittarius. But on her way, she meets Pluto and she gives him one last nod before she exits the darkness, before she exits the shadow realm. I should mention that Pluto is going to be moving into Aquarius next month. And so this is the very last bit of time that Pluto will be spending here. And it's nice that we have this collaborative sextile here that's giving some harmony between these two planets as they speak to each other on their way out. Venus in our lifetimes will never speak to Pluto again while he is in Capricorn, in at least a more beneficial type of major aspect. So this is sort of their last handshake, their last deal before they go off into the future together. So maybe even be thinking about that. Pluto's been in Capricorn now for the last 15 years, since 2008. We as a collective are moving into a new chapter and a new era. And so what are the things that perhaps you're holding against your own self-worth that it's time to let go of, that it's time to step away from and shed? Because I think that's kind of what Venus is encouraging us to do. And interesting, right, that we have Venus in a Mars-ruled sign of Scorpio, Mars being the traditional ruler, while she is running the sun. So I do think that a lot of this process of this full moon and recognizing that things are going to be more difficult, perhaps even more combative, is something that even our sun, with the ruler of Venus right now, understands on a deep level. So maybe it's something that you've known that needed to come for a long time, perhaps like a confrontation that you've just been putting off, and you need to just let go of whatever a lie or a hiding mechanism is, and just expose what the deeper truth is in this moment in time, no matter how difficult it may be and no matter what kind of strife it causes. The last thing I want to mention is the full moon, right, in Aries is being run by this Mars. Mars is in Cancer, and look, it is directly squaring this full moon. So Mars is coming in with a bit of a vengeance as usual, and because Mars is the ruler, we're going to look to Mars as what energy is it presenting, and this is incredibly activating. So you may be very, very busy around this time, really burning the candle at both ends, having to put out the fires and maybe start the fires where necessary, and you're balancing between all these things. And Mars in Cancer is very easily defensive because, frankly, it's getting attacked a little bit in this instance, right? We have the sun and the moon kind of squaring off with it, and so it can feel like you're getting attacked on all sides, and The Mars is going to say, I'm putting up the boundaries and leave me alone and I didn't do it and get off my case. And so if you're feeling yourself coming from this Mars place, that's perfectly understandable. Recognize that, give yourself the space where necessary, because you may just need a minute alone, a sandwich, and a nap, okay? And so being in Cancer, Mars needs to nurture and care for itself. It needs to retreat back into that sanctuary in order to feel safe and protected. So that way it can go out and say, okay, I'm going to meet you where you're at, sun. We're going to take some actions to do a little bit more leveling out and balancing. And Moon, I'm going to appreciate that you were trying to heal in this instance. You were trying to work with all of the energy being presented and integrate the deep psychological truth that you are trying to expose with this full moon, that your heart is trying to look at, perhaps in the pursuit of healing once again. So take care of your Mars, everybody, because Mars is running the show. Remember this deeper psychological collaboration and agreement going on between Venus and Pluto. So a lot of the really deep stuff, the really far back reaching stuff is coming up for you. Sit with it, acknowledge it, recognize that there's power in it, and just appreciating you and your self-worth a little bit and what it is you need to let go of so that way you're ready to step into that new place. I so hope you enjoyed today's forecast and a little bit of learning about the chart. Please be sure to catch my monthly forecast over on Bonfire Babble podcast with Corey and Jetta. I do the astrological forecast for every zodiac season. You can sign up for my newsletter so that way you're always notified about new episodes as well as new forecasts and new Sabbath astrology. I will have the Samhain, which is New Year astrology, coming for you soon next week. If you liked the format and you liked my work as an astrologer, I'd love to book a reading with you if you're interested. I do have a booking calendar on my site, so you can do that, or you can purchase a recorded reading where I will get back to you within 72 hours with a recording and your charts. And lastly, I just want to encourage you to keep an eye out because I am releasing new music in the coming weeks. I'm very excited about, all in preparation for Samhain and a ritual I'm doing with the Divine Warrior Witches, which is totally sold out, but the music will be available to stream everywhere. So really excited about that for any of you who follow my music. Thank you so much for watching this full moon. I hope that you are able to work toward manifesting a life of divine purpose and glory, for you are worthy of that and you are free. Blessed be.